Hey everybody, welcome back. So in this video, we are going to talk about a technique that has actually been around since 1991. Now, the nice thing about artificial intelligence or a lot of different technologies is something will get invented 30 or 40 years ago, and there really won't be a place for it. And then all of a sudden, something pops up, and the next thing you know, it's a big thing again. And what we're talking about in this case is something called mixture of experts. Now, if you are running a what's called a dense model or a dense neural network, every time you run inference and you send a token in, it needs to go through all of the layers and the entire layer activates. So let's use a prompt here. So let's think about a neural network as like a pile of mail like this. And every layer, we have alternating feed forward layers, which are just a calculation and moving forward, and then information layers in between each other. So what we've got is, in the case of something like ChatGPT 4.0, you have 120 of these layers, and then you have a total of 1.8 trillion parameters, which means you have 15 billion parameters. So every time a token would come in, this entire layer would light up. So there would be 15 billion mathematical computations going on at once. Then it would pass the results of that to the next layer, and you get just trillions upon trillions of mathematical computations every time a token comes in. Now, keep in mind, when we're talking about tokens, a word is made up of one or two tokens. So every time you're passing a token through, there's a lot going on in a dense neural network. So what made mixture of experts all of a sudden so popular and something that everybody wanted to learn about wasn't the first two AI companies to actually use it, which is mixture of experts is used in ChatGPT 4.0, and mixture of experts is also used in Mixtral. Okay, now both of these LLMs use mixture of experts for the really important reason, which is running inference on a multi-billion or trillion parameter model is going to be extremely expensive. First of all, you're going to need enough GPU power to do the whole thing. And then you're going to run insane amounts of electricity through it, while simultaneously you're using your entire model for every token that's coming through. Now, mixture of experts was introduced in 1991 as part of a white paper for this very purpose. Think of it more of the way your brain works. Or let's put it this way. Think of it like a college campus. You're asking a question. And now if instead of going to the entire university and saying, can somebody answer this question for me about chemistry? There would be somebody at the front door. And that person at the front door goes, oh, this is a question about chemistry, so now we're going to direct you to the chemistry department. Oh, this is about biology, so we're going to direct you to the biology department. Mixture of experts is a mathematical, algorithmic way of doing the same thing. So the reason all of a sudden mixture of experts became so popular is because of DeepSeek V3. Now, DeepSeek V3 is a 671 billion parameter model, which they claim to have trained for $5.6 million. Now, there's always two things that happens when somebody claims a huge breakthrough like this, because we're talking about this should cost tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars to train a 671 billion parameter model. So when DeepSeek came out and said they did it for 5.6 million, everybody said either A, they're lying, or B, they stole it from OpenAI. So I'm one to believe that they didn't do either, because when you look at the mixture of experts and the way that it's implemented inside of DeepSeek, what you see is they use this as a workaround for the fact that they have inferior GPUs. So because of an embargo from the United States, DeepSeek can only run the NVIDIA H800 GPUs and not the state-of-the-art NVIDIA 100 GPUs. And so that put them at a disadvantage. So one of the ways to work around the disadvantage is with ingenuity. And mixture of experts is a way, which is a very ingenious way of doing something. Now, what they did that's different is they don't just do mixture of experts for running inference. They also use mixture of experts for training the model. So that means when you are training a model, what ends up happening is you every time you put a token in and you say you're going to train on this series of tokens, this context, it is going to go recalculate the weights and the biases for the entire model. So if we're talking about a 1.8 trillion parameter model, the resources necessary to train that whole thing is astronomical. So even with your 671 billion parameter model, that's something that's going to end up being astronomical. But because of some of the things that the DeepSeek came up with in their white paper, they were able to train the model using this mixture of experts concept from the training and not just in inference. So let's think about mixture of experts as far as our layers go again. So I got my layers and the token is coming in. Now when I'm running inference, we have a model at the beginning, okay? So this model at the beginning is called the router. And what the router does is it, based on the context of the token pattern that came in, it decides which of the experts, or actually which two of the experts, are the right experts to solve the problem. And then those two experts, those two like mini models, because what you're doing is you're creating a network of networks. So those two mini models each return the results, then they're combined, they're mixed, so it's the mixture of experts, and then it's sent back. So running this at inference, just in the case of DeepSeek v3, DeepSeek v3 has 671 billion parameters, but when you're running inference, you're only running it on 37 billion parameters. Now, 37 billion parameters still seems like a lot of parameters because it is a lot of parameters. But the difference between 37 billion and 671 billion is a pretty big deal. Now, running your model and running your inference this way also leads to a whole bunch of creativity in the way you architect both your training machines and your inference machines. When you're running training on a large model, so let's say you're running training on all 600 billion parameters, that's not going to fit on a single GPU. And as a matter of fact, it's going to take thousands of or tens of thousands of GPUs all working on the same problem. Well, those GPUs all have to talk to each other, and they do something called gradient averaging. So they all do their work, then they have to compare their work, which means they have to pass massive amount of data across pretty much the entire data center. So with training using the mixture of experts technologies or techniques, you don't have to compare across multiple experts. So let's say, because we're talking with DeepSeek, we're talking 37 million or 37 billion parameters when you're executing inference. That means it's probably about 18 to 18 and a half billion parameters per expert. So again, the process that it takes is the tokens come in, the router says, hey, you're a chemistry problem. Now that's an oversimplification because when it breaks these experts down, it doesn't break them down like chemistry, physics, English, math, Mandarin. It doesn't do it that way. Okay, what it basically does is it creates the experts, and you ahead of time you're not saying, well, I want one expert that's chemistry and another expert that's medicine. Like in the case of Mixtral, there's 8 experts at each layer, and the training process is actually how each of the experts is defined. Now, one other thing that there's actually 2 other really important things that DeepSeek did in their implementation of mixtures of experts. One is called auxiliary load-free load balancing, or it's auxiliary loss-free load balancing. I never get that one right. Okay, with auxiliary loss-free load balancing, that makes sure that the experts are spread out because part of the what's getting trained at the beginning is this router. Well, what if everything ends up in one expert? Well, then what you end up with is you end up with a 651 or 671 billion parameter model that really only has 35 billion parameters. So, with this technology or this technique that they put together at DeepSeek, the load balancing makes sure that you were balancing all of the weights and the biases or all of the information or knowledge that's gained through the large language model. You're balancing it across the experts. So that is one reason why DeepSeek had a lot of success training such a huge model with for so little money. Because what they're doing is they're balancing the training across these experts, which means the GPUs don't have to communicate with each other nearly as much to do this kind of training. Now, the other thing that they did, now, and this is called working with your back against the wall, because most drivers that run NVIDIA run CUDA cores, and CUDA is the lowest level of interface between you and the GPU. And pretty much everybody at all the big AI companies, they use CUDA. Those are the assembly language or the C language interfaces to the cores. Well, because DeepSeek is operating without all the resources that the American AI companies have, they actually replaced the CUDA cores and then replaced it with their own drivers. Now, one of the things that's so important about these drivers is they can do in 8-bit quantization the same precision that the CUDA core drivers would do with a 32-bit precision, which means the models run much, much smaller. They're a quarter of the size. And over time, that quarter of the size actually turns out to be even more and more important because with the 8-bit quantization instead of a 32-bit precision, you don't have nearly as much memory that you need in order to run the operation. So what DeepSeek did was they implemented this method called mixture of experts, which is basically splitting your model up so the entire thing doesn't have to fire at the same time. Then they improved the low-level communications with the GPUs by avoiding using the CUDA drivers and using their own drivers that they wrote. And by doing this, they were able to actually implement something that is novel, creative, very, very powerful, and can run on much less resources than you're running on if you were trying to run something like a ChatGPT 4.0. If you're trying to run ChatGPT 4, all of a sudden you've got 1.7 trillion parameters that you need to fit in your GPU farm. With DeepSeek, even with 700 or 671 parameters, you can run it on relatively decent sized equipment. Now, when you start to make the model smaller and you start to use the distilled models like the 8 billion Llama 3, which is my favorite, that fits in about 7 gigabytes of memory or GPU memory on my Mac Mini or my MacBook or whatever I'm running it on. So, mixture of experts is part of the technologies that makes DeepSeek so powerful. It makes it so that instead of working like one big dense neural network, it's a mixture of experts. It goes along with the name. So when your request comes in, the router says this request belongs on these two experts. Now, it doesn't use a single expert. It always uses multiple experts. And the reason for that is the quality of the output you get when you're using the multiple experts. Now, AI development, especially at this level, is a lot of trial and error. So one of the things we really got to give DeepSeek credit for is coming up with a concept like the mixture of experts. Another really great concept they came up was the cold start training or cold start data. When you just look at the things that they did between the mixture of experts and the cold start data, there should be no surprise that they were able to create reasoning models, that they were able to create 671 billion parameter models at $5.6 million in training costs. Now, when you talk about the training costs, you do actually need to keep something in mind. Yes, I believe that they were able to train it for $5.6 million. But how many tens of millions of dollars of research went into training it for $5.6 million? You know, there's setup costs, there's training costs. How many times did DeepSeek run this model at $5.6 million before they got a workable one? Okay, it might have been 10, 20, 30 different times before they got it to work. Now, what makes this so great for the rest of us is now that the lessons have been learned and the knowledge has been gained, we, as AI engineers, have the opportunity to use these techniques in our application. And as somebody who is a big proponent of small models, I just love the way DeepSeek works, and I love the way it works with distilled models. So I hope that is a satisfactory first introduction to Mixture of Experts. And please hit like, hit subscribe. It helps the channel out, gives me the motivation to keep making these videos. But yes, Mixture of Experts is something from 1991 that just reappeared. So have a great day.